Just gonna read them.
Yeah, I'll put the comments on the screen here, and they'll be on the stream for you to read out.
Okay, perfect, cool.
All right, so we're live now, so we'll get started with that. All right, so first of all, thank you to Don for joining us today. It's an absolute pleasure to have you join us today and just talk Rockets basketball. So first of all, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Glad to be here. I wish we could be coming to y'all after a Rockets win against the Warriors. That obviously went right down to the wire. Everyone saw how that game ended, but yeah, should be a good stream still. And always glad to talk Rockets basketball, especially getting this close to the trade deadline. Things are flying around. Stuff is going to happen here pretty soon. So great time to be covering the Rockets here.
Yeah, and we have the topic for today's discussion is we're going to be going through the Rockets players, talking about halfway through the season, how are we feeling about the state of the roster, state of the players on the roster, and comparing our expectations for them at the beginning of the season and how we feel about them so far. We're also going to later on, we're going to talk about a bunch of reports which have come out today about the three biggest trade pieces for the Rockets at this deadline, which is Eric Gordon, Christian Wood, and John Wall. A lot of updates coming on about them. We'll talk about that. And we'll also have a Q&A as well for any questions that will be placed in the live chat below. So we'll get right into it now, and we will start off with, I think, the most polarizing amongst Rockets social media and just people in general, amongst Rockets fans. That's the biggest free agent signing of the offseason being Daniel Theis. He's gotten a bit of a bad rep amongst the Rockets Twitter community and just Rockets media and fans in general. But again, I feel like the bar was set a little bit too high for Theis. And because of that, there's been some disappointment, but there's no doubt Daniel Theis probably one of the more disappointing players to start off the season.
Yeah, so for me, the original concept of bringing Theis in made sense because Christian Wood is a guy who hasn't done enough to really consider him a cornerstone foundational defensive piece. Offensively, he's looked really good, but defensively, he had times last year where he flashed a little bit, and he had times where, he just kind of didn't look super engaged, didn't look like he would be able to be a rim protector, especially against bigger guys like someone like Joel Embiid, someone like Karl-Anthony Towns, right? And we've seen those things kind of come into play this year. So just structurally, it made sense why you're going to bring in Daniel Theis, right? You want him to guard the bigger players. You want him to potentially be a guy that's going to be the rim protector if Christian Wood can't fill that role. And that is not how it went. That is not how it went at all. Daniel Theis did not have one of his better seasons defensively. He had some flashes, but you don't want to see flashes from a guy like Daniel Theis. You want to see flashes from a guy like Usman Garuba or Alperen Sengun, right? Those are the guys that are young. They should still be developing, and you want to see some flashes, but you shouldn't be seeing flashes from a guy of Daniel Theis's stature in the league. So offensively as well, he came in as a guy that was going to shoot the three. He was replacing Kelly Olynyk. And, when Kelly Olynyk was here after that trade from Miami, he looked so good. He was shot really well. Him and Christian Wood had good rapport on the court together. And just his shooting opened up so much. His passing opened up so much. Daniel Theis has not been able to fill that void as a passer. And as a shooter, we've seen so many teams just leave Daniel Theis open, let him shoot. And that's really bogged down the offense. We had to go through those first 15 to 20 games of the double big lineup, and that was negatively impacting KPJ, Jalen, mostly those two guys. Some of the other guys as well, probably Eric Gordon a little bit. But once we got out of the double big lineup, Daniel Theis started collecting more DMP CDs. The offense looked a lot better. The defense has looked bad at times since they stopped playing him. And again, Daniel Theis wasn't a fix-all defensively, but he did have some moments where, the defense looked competent. It was just the offense was so bad with him because of the spacing and because of teams just, basically giving him the Westbrook treatment, just totally letting him shoot whenever he wanted to. And that really was what kind of drug it down for Daniel Theis. But there's still some ability for him to salvage that signing. When I say him, I mean Rafael Stone. If they can move Daniel Theis to this trade deadline, a contender that may have a better use for his skill set, then hey, it's not all lost, because when they signed that contract, it was a very strange salary structure, a player option on the or a team option on the last year, not crazy high annual value, and very movable, very desirable for a team that needs a mid-level salary where they may be able to send someone with that same level of salary back that they have expiring, or don't look to have in their future plans as well.
And I just wanted to add, I was going to ask about a potential trade for Tice, but I think what I wanted to add is I think it's a lot easier to move Daniel Tice than people think, because it's almost strange how ineffective he's been with the Rockets, because he has a history of being a capable, productive role player with the Boston Celtics, which is where he made um, most of his waves around the league as far as him being recognized as an impact defensive power forward slash center. It's kind of, I think it's kind of surprising to me. I thought this would go a lot better than it actually ended up doing. But again, it's pretty clear that, like you said, the flashes, it's different for a 19-year-old Usman Garuba, like you said, than a 29-year-old, 28-year-old Daniel Tice. So I think with Tice, there's a lot of teams that can use a guy like Daniel Tice. I wanted to ask you if there are any teams that do come to the top of your mind that can use the services of a guy like Daniel Tice.
Charlotte is going to be a team that gets brought up over and over in the we need a center discussion. I'm trying to think who else I can think of off the top of my head. I would say Charlotte. It depends on what they want to do. It depends if they want to go all in. Again, they could be in the mix for Christian Wood as well. But I'm trying to think if I can think of anyone else. That's the main one that makes sense. Maybe um, the Milwaukee Bucks, because they lost Brooke Lopez for a long time. I think they did a signing with DeMarcus Cousins, and that didn't continue on past the end of his contract. But I think those would probably be the two teams I'd look at. I'm sure there are other guys that are the teams that can go in the mix depending on what they're trying to do. Daniel Tice may end up getting moved as part of a bigger trade as well if the Rockets get in with the Ben Simmons deal and things like that. So, just we'll have to see.
And with Tice, I think that's the most controversial figure out of everyone here, because he was the guy who people had so much hype for. I personally, from the onset, felt like Kelly Olynyk was going to be a better fit, but I think it was pretty clear that he probably wasn't going to stay here. With Tice, I think it's just that people set the bar a little bit too high for him. It was a situation where people overestimated just how much of an impact he'd really have, where he came in. I think he's done relatively good for what he's supposed to be doing. Again, the offensive impact, I think, is the worst part of it. The fact that we were like 1-16 in those first stretch of games with Daniel Tice and Christian Wood sharing the floor together. And I think he gets a little bit too much of the blame for that. It's not entirely on him. I think the whole team was struggling. Christian Wood was in a really bad slump to start the season as well.
Yeah.
That also has a big part to it. But
KPJ was turning the ball over a lot more than he is now, right? If KPJ was playing the way he is now back then maybe you don't have as many problems with the double big lineup. But hey, what can you do? KPJ is still a player as well and still developing.
I mean, again, we're going to talk more about KPJ later on, but his progression as a point guard has been also something really, really good to see. And it just happens to be that he was still figuring out how to figure out the point guard position, because again, the point guard spot is the most difficult position to play in the NBA, and it's by far the easiest position, the hardest position to switch to in the NBA, especially when you think about the fact that KPJ came into the league when he was on the Cavs. They were having him play at the 3. Then he comes in to Houston. He's a sort of a combo guard, 2/1 type of player. Then now he's being told to make a switch to a full-time point guard role. It's not an easy switch to make, and we'll elaborate a little bit more on this later on, but those growing pains also part of our struggles. Daniel Tice got a lot of the blame for it, but again, I think at this point it's clear that the Tice experiment isn't going to be working out for the Rockets, and the best case scenario is we can get him to a contender. For best case scenario for him and for us, frees up some front court minutes for Sengun and Wood, because he does still sporadically get minutes here and there, and just gives Tice a better scenario to compete as well, which I think he deserves for him being a well-respected veteran in this league. Now, we are now going to move on. We're going to talk about the rookies a little bit here, starting off with, I think, the guy who's probably surprised us the most this season with Josh Christopher. I mean, this guy was a 24th overall pick. Most people thought he would spend the majority of this season as far as a developmental player in the G League, but he's
Yeah.
come out, and I think on a lot of nights he's been the best rookie on the floor. This is no slight to any of our other rookies, but that's just a testament to just how incredible Josh Christopher has been to start the season off.
Yeah, so I did a lot of pre-draft scouting on the guys that would be in the Rockets range. So Josh Christopher was someone that I did a little bit of pre-draft stuff on. I'm not gonna say I came in here and expected him to develop this much this quickly. I thought he was gonna spend a lot of time in the G League, kind of like you mentioned. But I think there are some Rockets fans that weren't super locked in. Not everyone does this as much as some of us do. They heard the Josh Christopher is just Jalen Green's friend, or this guy may spend most of the year in the G League, and they thought, hey, this may not be as high of a pedigree guy as we could have gotten as like a Jared Butler, or even someone like Bones Highland was really coveted at that spot. I know one of my co-hosts on the Spaces, Zeke, he was pushing me to death to get Bones Highland. So Jaden Springer is another guy that people were really high on. So Josh Christopher, he had some pedigree. He came in. The situation at Arizona State wasn't ideal. Their offense was just really, really unorganized there. Comes in this year. It seems like the biggest development for Christopher is he's taking a lot better shots. And, he's even taking shots that, aren't necessarily Daryl Morey ball type of shots. He's taking some mid-range. He's taking some floaters. He's taking even some longer twos. But he's taking shots that are in the rhythm of the offense. He's not trying to do too much the way we saw him a little bit at Arizona State last year. His three-point percentage also is coming up a lot. And the other thing that I really saw from Josh Christopher, even in Summer League, was his handle is very good. He's strong. And he's able to shield the ball off using his body, and he has good vision. He can make passes. He's not someone that just goes into tunnel vision, not able to make plays. And we heard Steven Silas talk earlier this year about how he coached Josh Christopher about going underneath the basket, keeping your eyes up, and being able to make like a dump off or make the pass around, kind of back to someone on outside the 3-point line. And I think that's the trajectory that we're going to continue to see from Josh Christopher, expanding his game, continue to take high efficiency shots, and maybe getting a little bit more ball handling duties if someone like Eric Gordon ends up getting moved, right? You'll see Josh Christopher able to take a bigger role and just continue to expand on what he's done, because even in the beginning of the season, we heard GM Rafael Stone say that they saw Josh Christopher as an on-ball defender, and he's very good at that. He's very good at ball pressure, playing aggressively as a defender. But like a lot of other rookies, he needs to get better as an off-ball defender, and they compared him to Drew Holiday, right? Drew Holiday plays a very balanced game, plays a very effective game. Drew Holiday's not really trying to use a whole lot of like sizzle off the bounce. He uses effective, efficient moves to get where he needs to go because he's so strong. And again, that's exactly what we see with Josh Christopher, right? Very strong, able to get to his spots. And now that he's becoming more familiar with certain spots on the court, I think he's going to become even more efficient going into the second half of the season. And I'm very high on him. If we do move Gordon, maybe taking over that 6-man role for a few years here, and we'll see where it goes from there. I think a lot of people were getting into the area where KPJ, people would think maybe this guy is not a point guard. And Christopher was a guy that a lot of people said, hey, let's give this guy a look at point guard. And I think you're going to be able to do that in the second unit first. And we'll see what the looks look like with Jalen playing with Josh Green. So far, it's looked pretty good. Those guys have history together. They played together on, I think it was Vegas Elite, was the AAU team they were on together. So even though, Josh Christopher, like we said, isn't just Jalen Green's friend, that chemistry together can help Jalen a lot. So if you move Eric Gordon, play Josh Christopher as like the lead ball handler on that second unit, and they can continue to use Jalen in the role that they've seemingly tried to use him in, of more of an off-ball guy with some creation touches, some secondary creation touches. I think that's going to be the role that Christopher's going to slide into going to the rest into the rest of this season.
And with Christopher, I think his progression, I think as a point guard, has been what's been really intriguing to me.
Yeah.
Before Kevin Porter Jr. had this little consistent stretch, there was, like you said, a lot of talk about him taking over the role of being our point guard. I think we are a bit away from that being a possibility. I think he still has a ways to go as far as developing as a playmaker and a passer for us to really consider that. What I wanted to ask really quickly here is there a possibility in the future that we can get a 3-guard lineup perhaps of KPJ, Josh Christopher, and Jalen Green, not as a full-time unit, but sporadically here and there mixed in. Is there a possibility for that to be something going forward?
The reason I am going to say yes is because a lot of other teams have started going to 3 guard lineups as well. So, for example, right, Rick Carlisle, when he was in Dallas, was a huge fan of 3 guard lineups, and he'd run small guard lineups. When Kyle Lowry was still with the Raptors, they would run a lot of 3 guard lineups up there as well. So I think if nothing else, you're going to have, when you're playing against certain teams, Steven Silas has shown that, unlike Mike D'Antoni, he will really adjust to what the other team is doing and try to, put guys in those positions based on the other lineups that the other teams are doing and try to maximize them that way. I think you'll run into certain teams where it makes sense to run a 3 guard lineup, and I think Steven Silas will absolutely do that at that time. Will it be a staple the way we kind of saw Chris Paul, James Harden, Eric Gordon 3 guard lineups? I think a lot of that depends on how much strength that KPJ and Jalen Green are able to add, because right now you may be able to have Christopher kind of guard up a position, but it's really hard to have Jalen Green guard up a position. I think he needs to guard his current position and maybe even guard down. And KPJ, we've seen him be really successful against guys that are small and fast, like Steph Curry, more so than we've seen him be effective against guys like LeBron. And he did have some minutes on LeBron when we did play the Lakers, but that's a tough matchup, right? It ended up being Jayshawn Tate that went to that matchup for the most part. So I think we'll see that some when it makes sense. If those guys are able to add a lot of strength, then I think it becomes a lot more viable. I think we're probably 2.5 years away from seeing that on any sort of regular basis.
I think the possibility, I think this is like a wild scenario, but you could have this hypothetical team where you can have like KPJ, Jalen Green, Josh Christopher, not in that positional order, but also throw in Jayshawn Tate and Usman Garuba. That's a lineup that like they can outrun, outjump. They are like 99 out of 100 times they're going to be the most athletic unit on the floor. They're going to be the 5 most athletic players on the floor. And that's a lineup where if you're trying to play with pace, trying to play with tempo, trying to push the pace a little bit, get some energy going in the team, that's a lineup that, again, you can't use it for a very long time, but for like a 2-3 minute span even, I think that is just going to be insane as far as once Garuba gets into a situation where he can get real minutes. It's going to be something that's going to be, I would like to see, just to see for fun, just to see how it would look, because I think the potential with that lineup on both ends of the floor is insane, because you've got legit stoppers in Garuba, Tate, and Christopher, and you've also got the explosive scoring ability of Jalen Green, Kevin Porter Jr. I mean, we've seen him over these past few games, especially in clutch time. He can score in bunches. Yeah. And, of course, we all know how touted of a scorer Jalen Green and Josh Christopher are, so there's no elaboration on that. So, again, I would like to see the potential of that lineup as well. We're going to you have something to add?
I was just going to say, I was also pretty high on Garuba as like a small ball center coming out as well. Him developing offensively enough to be able to make those lineups work in a way that's not, two big lineup, double big lineup like we saw earlier this year. That's going to be really important because, Jayshawn Tate, we saw him hit 3 of 7 against the Jazz from 3, but one of those two guys is going to have to become a better shooter if you really want to make that lineup a lot more palatable. But, just from an offensive standpoint, I think something that people really haven't been able to see yet from Garuba, because he's been sectioned off to the G League so much, is he is a very good short roll passer. So you could use him as a pick and roll big offensively. And I think that would be a easy fix to use him in that way in a small lineup like that. So,
yeah. And I think with Garuba, we all know the defensive potential. I'm not sure. You might have seen the clip where he gets his ankles taken by one of the players on the other team in the G League, and then he recovers, gets back up, and then blocks the same player's shot. I think that's just a little peek into the defensive potential of Garuba. He got put on the floor and then still got back up and made the play to get the stop. And there's not that many players in the league that can do that. Like if you get dropped on a possession, most of the time that's it, like that's a bucket after that. So the fact that he's been able to do that in the G League, just incredible. We will have a little bit on Garuba coming up later, but for now, I wanted to talk about the guy who's more and more with each game, he's looking like he's going to be the point guard of our future, and that is Kevin Porter Jr. It's been an up and down season for him, mostly I think with people rushing his development a little bit, or at least rushing their expectations for his development. I've said this time and time again. He still hasn't played. I don't know. He might have just finished across his 82nd career game, which would be a full NBA season. So he's still, even though this is his third year, he's still, as far as playing time goes, very, very raw as an NBA prospect, and especially when you consider he's had to go through a couple of position changes already. I've been very, very impressed, especially as of late with Kevin Porter Jr. And I think everyone has to, if they've been watching him play over these past few games. I don't see how you can't be impressed with how he's been doing.
Yeah, so I just checked real quick. He played 50 games his first season. He played 26 games last year, and he's played 31 games this season. So he's at 107. Still not a full season at point guard, though. So he's, I think, 57 games as a point guard, 50 games as mostly a 2, but used as a 3 as well. So his role clarity was just not there until he got up with a big team with the Rockets last year. So yeah, I came into the season with really high expectations for KPJ. He kind of stumbled out of the gate. He had some turnover issues. He had some shot selection issues, we'll say. I think the way that they tried to structure some of the offense didn't really play to his strengths as well. They tried to use a lot of 5 out. They tried to use a lot of some motion and some other sets, but they didn't do a lot of just pure pick and roll. And then at a certain point, they started going more towards that KPJ Christian Wood pick and roll. And that's just really what Kevin Porter and Christian Wood's strengths really lie in, is playing pick and roll. Christian Wood's an amazing finisher. We all saw those couple of games that he played with James Harden. It looked like the best pick and roll pairing in the history of the league. So getting Kevin Porter Jr. to really tap into that more and being able to play more pick and roll definitely started getting him on the right track. He had his little injury issues, was out for a while, and then he's just now really getting in his rhythm again since he was out with injury. So getting the turnovers down was critical. Playing more pick and roll was critical. I picked him to be an MIP type of guy this year. I don't think he's going to get to that level, but if he can get to a level that builds on what he did last year, continues to build on what he did earlier in the season, I think that would be a comfortable result for me. Getting him reps at point guard is obviously the most critical thing. And I think a lot of people have kind of conceded at this point that Jalen Green on-ball reps are going to have to take a drop to get KPJ more reps at point guard and really find his way, because he is going to be up for an extension first. So that's another big piece that comes in the KPJ story. Are they going to extend him this year? Are they going to extend him next year? Are they going to let him go into restricted free agency and let him get a deal and then match that? Those are the 3 real options that are on the table right now. And until they get enough data to decide what they want to do of those 3 options, it's going to be a lot of KPJ allowing him to figure it out, allowing him to learn what his spots are on the court, how he can impact the game as more of a scorer or more of a playmaker. And I just think overall, my expectation for him was higher coming into this year. But again, I was very high on KPJ. The 50-10 game last year may have given some people unrealistic expectations this year, but at the same time, it does show what a peak KPJ type of performance can do. And when you're a young player, you want the flashes, right? And then you want to go from flashes to consistency. And I think now he's at a point where he's getting more consistent. He may not have that peak type of output that he had last year in some of those games, but you also have to think defenses are more game planning for Kevin Porter Jr. Last year, he came out of the G League. Teams didn't really know what to expect. And then gradually they were like, okay, hey, this guy put up 50 and 10 on Drew Holiday. Maybe we need to start taking him a little bit more seriously. And I think that's what's happened this year. You have a lot of teams game playing for him, giving him their best defensive player. And, he had to learn how to adjust to that level of defensive attention. I think he's starting to get there, and hopefully he'll finish out the season on a more consistent note. If he can get his assist to turnover ratio, not even at the level that he's been at the last couple of games, just maybe even like 2-1. That would be a great outcome on the season as a whole. If we can get closer to 3-1, then we're really cooking there. But that's my takeaways generally. One last thing. KPJ has done a lot better this year defensively. I think last year he just wasn't locked in, was still trying to learn the point guard position, and he still is trying to learn the point guard position, but he really came into this year with the mindset of, I'm going to give him my all defensively. If the offense doesn't hit, then hey, that's okay. But I'm going to make sure I am attentive defensively and making the right rotations and making sure I'm locked in on ball. And we just saw a game where he guarded Steph Curry. Probably he was the best defender on the team guarding Steph Curry. So that's a big sign in the right direction. I mean, that's a defensive matchup where you can't turn off for even half a second because Steph Curry is going to be gone off of 2 screens, hitting a shot in your face. So I think that was another big step we've seen from him. If he can be a two-way guy, a lot of people were saying, you can't have KPJ and Jalen Green because they're both all offense, no defense type of guys, but they are also very athletic, lengthy guys. And if they can lock in defensively and become more of two-way guys, that makes that backcourt pairing a lot more palatable, moving forward into the future.
I was just going to ask really quickly about his sort of emergence as a player who can be counted on down the stretch. Because early on in the season, when we were in close games, it was almost always just give the ball to Eric Gordon and then let him do his thing. But I think now seeing Kevin
or Christian Wood, we saw
Christian Wood. I think
Wood
that was the worst case.
Well.
I mean, that was just unacceptable. Like there shouldn't be a reason why you should be giving the ball to 35 with 20 seconds left in the game, and it's like you're down 1 or tied. Like that's just inexcusable. But even Eric Gordon, like, do you really want to see the ball in his hands? I understand he's a veteran. I understand he has the game experience, but I mean, we've seen time after time him have the ball and then all of a sudden it's a turnover because he tries to get in a pick and roll with Christian Wood. He misreads the defense and then it results in a turnover. We've seen that countless times, but I think what we have right
the ball
now
off his foot. That's been a common refrain from
something.
from
it just doesn't seem like he's the closer. And so the fact that we've seen KPJ emerge as the closer is, I think, the perfect scenario for us. And it's been really a revelation for the team as a whole because now you've got a legit closer for the future as well. So like if you're in a tie game and you got 7 seconds on the clock, you know who to give the ball to. He's the one who's going to be making the play. We've seen him for the past 7-game stretch. He's been the guy time after time making plays. The Wizards game and the Spurs games, the 2 games that really come to my mind as far as games where he's really turned it up when it really matters. And that emergence, I think, is what's been really impressive to me over these last few games.
Yeah, so we did a space, I think not this past Sunday, but 2 Sundays ago. And it wasn't after the Jazz game. I can't remember which game it was after. I think it was after the second Kings game. And we were talking about, who do you see as the closer in this Rockets pecking order? And a lot of people said Eric Gordon, Christian Wood, mostly because of seniority. And then KPJ kind of came after those two. And, I'm with you. I think because of KPJ's skill set, he has the most creative handle. He has the most moves that he can get to in his bag, right? Like Eric Gordon is able to get to the rim. Eric Gordon's able to take, a pull-up 3 off of a quick move. But you don't see Eric Gordon really stringing together a combination of dribble moves to be his defender with a lot of craft. Eric Gordon's a physical player. He's a veteran player that does have some tricks in his bag. He's able to draw fouls because of the gravity of his shot. He's shooting 45, 46% from 3 this year. But Kevin Porter Jr. is able to manipulate defenders. We heard, when he was talking about that 50 and 10 game, I was sliding Drew Holiday all over the court, right? And that's what he can do. He's very shifty. He's very quick. He's very athletic. And that's something you want in a closer, right? You want someone that's going to either have an athleticism advantage, be able to shoot over the top, be able to create separation out of nothing. And Kevin Porter Jr. has all of those. And on top of those, he does have the playmaking as well. So if a team decides they're going to sell out on him completely, then you can get the ball to Christian Wood, who's in the dunker spot, or Christian Wood on a roll, or Christian Wood on a pop after they're trying to jam Kevin Porter. So because he has those specific skills, it just makes him the perfect guy to be a closer. And, just mentally, KPJ is a guy last year, a lot of people talked about, he would make a mistake, he'd hang his head. Or if he gets off to a bad start in the game, he would hang his head and, not have that same effort and intensity throughout the game. A lot of these games he has got off to fast starts. I think for him, the next step is going to be, if he gets off to a slow start, can he flip the switch and really lock back into this type of mentality that we've seen in these last couple games? So the first time he has a game where, again, he doesn't start off shooting hot, doesn't start off able to get to the rim very efficiently, then we'll see how he's able to respond to that. But, just structurally, I think, like we said, physical tools, his bag, what he's able to do as a passer as well. Those things all make Kevin Porter Jr. the perfect closer. Even James Harden, right? We saw James Harden really tried to create a lot with his physicality and tried to draw fouls. If you look at Kevin Porter Jr.'s stats, he's drawing like three free throws a game. That is not a lot, especially for a guy that has the ball in his hands as much as Kevin Porter Jr. does. So that may be another step he can take of, learning how to draw fouls. But it is good to see that he has been able to close these games out in spite of like not getting a ton of foul calls. So if you can start from that type of base where, you're just able to hit the shots, you're just able to get to the rim and do whatever you need to do that way, eventually teams are going to foul you to stop you. And so making sure he's able to hit his free throws once he does get fouled, and, just being able to have some of those, some people call them, dark arts or, just the tricks to get fouled. I think that's going to be a next step in his progression as a closer.
For me, again, the foul drawing is, I think, an issue for both Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green. These are both guys who, when you look at the games and you see how often these guys are attacking the basket, there's no reason why they should be getting as few of free throws that they're getting. And I think some of it has to do with the fact that they just haven't gotten that star's whistle yet.
Yeah.
That people talk about, that, you see guys like LeBron or James Harden or Trae Young. These guys have mastered the art of drawing the whistle, and it's reduced a little bit. But again, for guys who play through contact and finish through contact as much as Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green do, it's almost baffling to see the lack of foul calls in their favor. So I think that is a huge development as far as his scoring goes. Again, if he got the whistle that stars in this league do, I think you're looking at his scoring going up to now almost 20 points per game, maybe even more. That might be a little bit of a stretch, but as he develops, there's no reason why.
Probably 18.
18. Yeah, 18
on this season. If you got
the
line two more times a game. Yeah.
Definitely 18. Those high teen numbers, I think for KPJ, that's what you want to see. Again, no one is asking or expecting KPJ to go out and be a 30-point per game scorer, 25-point per game scorer. If he can go out, draw his fouls, I think for him, the volume isn't as important as it is the efficiency. I think if he can improve his efficiency from 2 and from 3, as a finisher, I think that's also very, very important. More than the 3-point range, if he can improve his finishing at the basket, that's going to be huge for him as far as taking strides in his scoring. The 3-point range will come. We've seen him, able to hit the shots that matter when he needs to. So I'm not worried about that. I think if he can get
he is shooting currently a career high from 3 on the season. So earlier on the season, a lot of people were worried, like, hey, this guy's regressed. He was shooting, I think, 29 to 30%. In the last couple of games, he raised that percentage up to now it is a career high. And again, his career high is not that great. His career high is 34%. So that's what he's shooting right now. If he can push that to 36%, you're looking at a different player. I mean, I think that's really all it comes down to. Like you said, from 2 as well. If he can be more effective getting to the rim and drawing fouls, that's going to increase his efficiency, obviously, because if you get fouled and you miss a shot and they don't call the foul, that's still counting as a free throw attempt, versus if you get fouled, then it doesn't count as a free throw attempt. So that's going to raise your efficiency as well. And, I think the last thing I want to say about Kevin Porter Jr. is you can be a passer and you can be a good passer. He's a great passer, right? We've seen him throw really, really good passes, flashy passes. I think the next step as a passer is knowing when to get his teammates involved. And that has an issue with Jalen, right? As much as people want to say Coach Silas doesn't get Jalen Green involved in the offense, well, some of that's on Kevin Porter Jr. too. You are the point guard. You need to know when you can get your guys in certain spots. And the game where there was the big outrage over Jalen Green not getting the touches, I think it was the Kings game. There were 2 plays in that game where Kevin Porter Jr. tried to go to Jalen Green and turn the ball over or wasn't able to hit the pass. I think one of them was like a passing crash or something. So there were times where he was trying to get Jalen Green involved and wasn't able to do it. But I think from his standpoint, knowing when to get knowing when to get Jalen Green involved, knowing when to get Christian Wood involved, knowing when to get the ball to Eric Gordon, depending on how long he's here, that's going to be the next frontier for him as a passer and as a point guard in general, just knowing how to think the game and knowing how to get the defense into rotation to get those guys open shots. I think that's the next step for him, because you can drive and kick, right? But that's going to be dependent on who the guy in the corner is. If you can set guys up, put them in position to where, hey, I'm put Jalen over here. Now we're driving, and then the rotation is going to come this way. And now Jalen's going to be open because I moved guys around on the court as a chess player, right? I think that's going to be what we need to see Kevin Porter Jr. do to take the next step as a passer and a facilitator.
And again, there is so much we can go on. We can have a full stream just about Kevin Porter Jr. There's that much to talk about him. But of course, we have a lot of other players to get to, so we're going to move on. And we're going to talk about the second rookie that we're going to be talking about here on the show, and that is Alperen Sengun. I think he's shown more than enough for us to know that this guy's going to be a stud in the future. And I think all that's remaining for him is really just a chance. He just needs more opportunities, more minutes logged in his name. And if he can get that, I think the sky is not even, this beyond the sky is the limit for him. As far as how good of a player he can be for us. People are touting him the next Jokic. I don't know if he can get to that, but I think he can definitely get very, very close. He's going to be a guy who I think 2-3 years down the line, we're going to be leaning on heavily for our offensive production. He's a guy, basically a one-man offense. He can generate something out of nothing. And we've seen that so many times. He makes the most absurd passes. And again, there is so much love about Sengun. His stats they're not eye-popping, but just seeing the game, seeing his impact whenever he's on the floor, at least on offense, it's truly remarkable. And there are not that many people, even at this age, that can do what Sengun's been doing right now.
I think for me, a more realistic comparison for Sengun is going to be Domantas Sabonis, right? I think that's a more realistic ceiling. Sabonis isn't as tall as Jokic is, and being taller and having like a longer wingspan definitely helps you as a defender. We've seen Sengun. He's a guy that when he came out in the draft, me and Itamar, I'm sure some of y'all's fans and watchers here will be familiar with Itamar and some of his work. We were on a draft stream and we talked about Sengun right as he got drafted. And, Itamar really went after Sengun for his defense. And, I was on there saying, defense is going to be a concern for him as well. We've seen this guy. He's able to pass. He's able to drive. He's able to create in the post. But being able to defend at the NBA level is really going to be what will take him from a guy that's able to play like a Luka Garza to a guy that's going to be a foundational type of piece for a team. And he's coming to the league. He's someone that he knows where he needs to be. He's in the right position. And even the last couple of games, I've seen an improvement from him as a rim protector. He's getting better at staying vertical when he's contesting at the rim. He's doing a better job getting to the spot and knowing where guys' tendencies are, how they're going to drive. And so that's going to be critical for him. Obviously, offensively, just getting him more reps with KPJ and Jalen, letting those guys, as much as we say KPJ has worked really well as a point guard in the last couple of games, allowing KPJ to work some off ball as well will help both Sengun and KPJ, because obviously Sengun, it gives him someone else to pass to and more space on the court. But KPJ as well, that's getting him more efficient, easier shots. He's a guy that's looked well spotting up this year. He's a guy that's looked well taking off the catch type of shots, DHO shots, and things like that. So getting Sengun the opportunity to play with some of the starters more, I think will help him be more effective as a passer. And with anyone, right? People talk about this with Draymond Green as well. When you're passing to great shooters, it's going to make your assist numbers look better. So if he's passing to guys that are hitting a lot of shots, it's going to make his assist numbers look better. It's going to open up things for him, like we said, as a driver and in the post. Teams not being able to double him as much. But just offensively, I think you really couldn't have expected any more from him this season. He came in, he's the MVP of the Turkish league. He's played so poised. His passing has been so amazing. We've all seen the Sengun highlights, and they're incredible for sure. Becoming a more consistent three-point shooter is going to help him, but he's been able to be very effective offensively, even without being a great three-point shooter. So that will just add another element to his game. Teams won't be able to sag off him as well. But even now, when teams do sag off of him, he has one of the more effective pump fakes in the league. Teams are always going for his pump fakes, and that's opening him up for the drive. And he's done so well as a driver. He keeps his head up and able to hit guys off passes while he's driving. And that's something that's very difficult for bigs. It's a very common skill for guards to have, to be able to keep their head up and hit guys while they're driving. But, Sengun, like we said, is a post player, a 5 possibly. And for him to have that, that's the one thing where you do see the Jokic in him, right? Jokic is able to drive, keep his head up, and hit the corner, hit the skip pass, whatever the case may be. And that's where I do see some of Jokic in Shingun's game, is when he is driving it and able to continue to be effective as a passer. But, right now, maybe a couple more counters in the post, getting that 3-point shot more consistent. I mean, that's really all you can ask for from Alperen Şengün at this point. Other than that, I mean, he just absolutely checked all boxes. Definitely exceeded expectations on the season, and looking forward to see his growth for years to come in a Rockets jersey.
And I'll just quickly wrap this up before we move on to the next person. I, for one, when the draft happened, I didn't do a whole lot of research on Sengun, mainly because he wasn't really expected to be anywhere near where we had our picks. And even if we were to trade up, I know there was a lot of rumors about trading up into Indiana's 13th selection. Even then, there wasn't a whole lot of rumors for us taking him. It was more you were looking at guys like, I know Kai Jones was the one who was mentioned. There were a few other people as well.
Jalen Johnson,
Jalen
Zaire
Johnson was one of
Williams.
them.
I think even Trey Murphy was mentioned in that.
Yeah, Trey Murphy. Chris Duarte early, but it became pretty clear that he was going to go earlier than we would have a chance to get him. But Sengun wasn't really one of the names mentioned. And so for me, after I did get a chance to watch him, I think it was kind of surprising to me how little there was as far as his passing ability. Most of the reports you were seeing were about, oh, he's a really, really good post player. And that's mainly what it was with him. He's a raw player. He has to do some work on defense, but he's a very, very gifted post player. I saw not a whole lot about his passing ability, which I think is just doing a slight to him, because
the reason I saw Şengün's passing ability, and I'm going to give away a little bit of a trade secret here. If you go on YouTube, there's a guy, I can't remember what his name is. If you look up basically any draft prospect, there's going to be a video that's like 2.5 hours. And what that guy does is he takes passing, shooting, shot creation, and then he takes defense, and then he just rips like every clip from him in those different categories. And so there was a Şengün passing mix that was on YouTube. And so that's why I was able to see it before the draft. I looked into Şengün a little bit because John Hollinger, not exactly a friend of Rockets fans, but he put Şengün as his number one player in the draft. And so I was like, okay, why is this guy getting so much buzz? Let me take a look at him. We'll see. Because we don't have a big track record of what Rafael Stone looks for in his prospects. We're going to have a better record now going into his third season as a drafter, but you don't have that track record of, Sam Presti or even Troy Weaver in Detroit, where so much about these guys' philosophy and so much about what they want in the draft. So as we get a better record of what Rafael Stone wants in a player, I think we'll be able to lock in more on the type of guys he may go for. But yeah, so that's why I was able to see some of the Şengün passing beforehand, because those I can't remember. I'll have to find that guy's name and tweet him out, because he does great work. But those supercuts are online if anyone wants to do that type of research on these prospects. I'm sure he'll do supercuts for all the guys this year as well.
Again, with Şengün, the main issues here are defensively. A lot of people have been nagging on him, especially lately, as far as his defense. I'm pretty sure that they'll come along. Again, will he ever be like a plus defender? Probably not, if we're being realistic. But as long as he can get to like a Jokic level defender where he's like average to below average in a way, I think that's really all that you would really need out of him. You don't need him to be like a lockdown defender by any means, just because of how gifted he is offensively. I think as long as he can be a situation where he's not like an extreme liability on defense, we'll be fine. We're going to talk now. Let's talk about some of the vets on the team, and we'll start off with Eric Gordon. Eric Gordon's been a pleasant surprise for a lot of us this season. My expectations weren't too high for him, and they certainly weren't what he's produced so far, which is being easily our go-to scoring option. He's really impressed in his opportunity to be the guy for us in a way, where all these years with James Harden, he's sort of been that third option of sorts behind whether it was James Harden and Chris Paul or James Harden and Russell Westbrook. He was always that third fiddle, whereas now he's really getting a chance to be the number one scoring option in a way. And I think he's done really, really well. And there's a lot of contenders that should be lining up to get him.
If you asked people before this year what they thought Eric Gordon was going to do, I can almost guarantee that no one was going to say he's going to have career high shooting from three, one of his best years as a driver. And I kind of got into this with Roosh on our show, but I think his handles looked a lot better this year. Personally, it seems like he has been, bouncing the ball off of his foot and, just losing it in, kind of random turnovers a little bit less than he has in the past. But yeah, Eric Gordon, A+, absolutely exceeded expectations. hopefully they move him. Eric Gordon is a guy that, unfortunately for him, unfortunately for the teams that he's been on, has been a injury risk. Thankfully, that hasn't reared its head this season. He's been very durable. They were holding him out of back to backs as like a precautionary thing. They're back to playing him on back to backs. I think we have most of our back to backs out of the way, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that, but yeah. Again, what more can you ask for Eric Gordon? And we got the report again today that Eric Gordon has been just a guy that great in the locker room, has been really helpful to the young guys in terms of how they watch film, in terms of how they need to prepare themselves. And, if you go back and look at pictures of Eric Gordon when he was younger, he's not the build that he is now. He was a lot skinnier. He's a guy that had to do a lot in the weight room, even though he was a very athletic guy. He won the dunk contest, I believe. So, this guy's not starting from ground zero as an athlete, but he still had to build out his frame. And now he's a guy that is able to defend in the post, able to defend and body up guys on the perimeter, and just be a great defender overall, a plus defender for sure. And like you said, any contending team would be absolutely lucky to have Eric Gordon. I think the Rockets, they may be playing the game a little bit with the we don't want to move Eric Gordon stuff. I believe he's going to get moved, but it's great to see a guy that is the last player from that 2018 title contention team go out on a positive note, because a lot of those guys didn't go out on a great note. Capella really got kicked to the curb so that Westbrook was able to play a style that was more conducive to him. PJ Tucker, it got contentious with him before he was traded to the Milwaukee Bucks last year. Obviously, we don't even have to go into the whole Harden saga. Westbrook and Chris Paul both kind of left on bad terms with the organization and with some of the other players. So it's good just from a morale standpoint to finally see a guy that, is part of those teams go out kind of on his own terms and not have a bunch of issues with the organization. I think Rafael Stone has done a lot to try to repair the image of the organization, that we treat these guys like assets and we're just, moving them around against their will almost. I think that image has been fully restored at this point. We had the DeMarcus Cousins thing too, where they paid out his full contract before they ended up waiving him last year and let him go to a team that would be more beneficial for him. So all in all, just absolutely A+ on Eric Gordon's season. And hopefully he does get moved to a contender and he has a great playoffs. I don't really mind where it is as long as we get probably at least a first round pick coming back.
I mean, in my opinion, I don't see why you wouldn't get a first round pick. Yes, I understand the contract's a little bit big, but he certainly played at a level where that contract is a lot more justifiable now. So I think
the second year becomes guaranteed only if his team wins a championship or becomes an all-star. And as great as he played this year, still probably not going to make the all-star team.
Yeah.
So, if a team's worried about that second year, I really don't think it's that big of a concern. If they win a title, they're probably not going to have a problem bringing Eric Gordon back for a following year.
I mean, again, you were talking about the small ball Rockets. Gordon was a very underrated part of that as well. A lot of talk was about PJ Tucker and Covington on that team, but Eric Gordon had a really big part of it as well. The whole team really, because of one of the main reasons why they were able to even pull that off was because the team from top to bottom was full of guys that were a lot more built for their position. James Harden, he is one of the more built guys at his position. Eric Gordon, we all know, is one of the better built guys at his position. Same thing with PJ Tucker. Robert Covington, very, very good shot blocker, even for his height. That's one of the reasons why they were able to make that work. And Eric Gordon, I think it's great, like you said, that he's able to leave on good terms. And I think that Rockets fans will have nothing but gratitude for Eric Gordon and what he's done and his positive attitude through it all. Not everyone on the team, the veterans, have been so upbeat and positive about it like Eric Gordon has to all of it. We saw PJ Tucker, his relationship get sour with the Rockets over time. Gordon stayed positive. He stayed optimistic. And I think you can't help but thank him and just be happy for what he's done so far for us. We do have two more players to get to before we have a few questions in the comments that we will get to. And so now we'll talk about a guy who some people hate him, other people still ride with him, and that's Christian Wood. I have personally been on the camp that says that we should probably get him out of here as soon as possible. But from a vacuum and unbiased standpoint, Christian Wood's had his highs and had his lows. Yes, he hasn't been what we've expected him to be, but at the end of the day, I think it's become pretty clear that he's more of a trade piece than a long-term asset, in my opinion. But that's what the season was about. Was he going to be a building block, or was he going to be a guy who it would be better off if we moved him? And I think it's, in my opinion, starting to become more clear that the latter is the more likely outcome here.
I think for a lot of people, the turning point on Christian Wood was when he had that incident where he didn't want to go back in the game. To his credit, since that time, hasn't had any problems, has looked a lot more engaged, specifically defensively, and also offensively as well. He's had some good matchups for him, excluding Embiid in that time, but he's looked a lot more engaged, looked a lot more bought into the game plan, I guess we'll say. Yeah, for me, I got into a big back and forth with Sam Vecini before the season. He said, trade Christian Wood now. Don't let it go into the season. Just trade him now and be done with it. And I was like, hey, Christian Wood could be very beneficial for Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green. And you want to at least get some data gathered on what that's going to look like. We've gathered a lot of the data now. It's like you said, it's been up and down. They've tried to use Christian Wood as a closer to very mixed results. We've had some success when KPJ has been a pick and roll handler with Christian Wood. We've seen Christian Wood do a tiny bit of pick and roll with Alperen Şengün as the ball handler to a variety of results in those sets. But I think for me, the Christian Wood number, if they were going to they can't extend him just because of the way his contract works, you wouldn't be able to get to the number he wants. So you would have to let him go into unrestricted free agency and then re-sign him to be able to get to a number that he would probably want. And I think that's just very risky. He didn't come to this team to be in a rebuild. He came to this team because James Harden and Russell Westbrook were here, and he wanted to play with that group. There's been nothing in his behavior really other than, these last string of games where he's tried a little bit harder kind of after getting, called out by a lot of people in the media, in Rockets media. That really tells me that, he would want to continue to be here for the rest of a rebuild versus going to a team, even like, say, the Charlotte Hornets, where they're a little bit ahead in their rebuild already. They're a team that's already making the playoffs. They have LaMelo. They have Gordon Hayward, and they're a team that is a Christian Wood away from maybe not being a contender, but maybe making, a home court advantage team in the playoffs. So just for me personally, I think I'm at a point where you scout what trade packages you can get for Christian Wood. If you can get something that, won't just be embarrassing to the team, you're going to get a decent return for him, go ahead and pull the trigger. Let some of these other guys get some touches, maybe get Garuba in there and start getting him rolling. I don't think this team is going to make a push for the play-in, even at this point. So keeping him around for that, I don't think really does much for me. Get the guys minutes, get him to a team where he's going to be more competitive situation. And I think that's where I'm at pretty comfortably now.
Yeah. And I know, Paulo Prodigy, he made a tweet saying that we should max out Christian Wood. I mean, you probably have joking about that, but
for the people that weren't in our group chat that we were in for that, he bet by Houston that, what was it? The Chiefs were going to win at a certain, or the Chiefs were going to get to a certain number of points or something. And so as the punishment for him losing that bet, he had to tweet that Christian Wood tweet out. So that's what happened with that. They did another one. I think he tweeted out, I can't remember what it was, but they were just doing a bunch of like prop bets basically in the group chat. So that's what happened with that. I'm sure when we do our podcast here in a couple of minutes, he'll be right back to slandering Christian Wood and trying to ship him out of town. But yeah.
I mean, Christian Wood, it was a report that came out earlier today. I'm finding it right now that they're saying that it's going to take a blow me away offer to move him, which I'm not sure what to think about that. I just want to hear what you thought about it quickly, because I thought that they should be trying to move him. But, I mean, it seems like the Rockets are not interested in moving him unless they can get an offer that they really like.
So it seemed like posturing to me. It seemed like a lot of the other reports we've heard out of the Rockets. We heard of Tim McMahon. We've heard of Kelly earlier in the year, and the message has really been the same every time. Like, look, Christian Wood might be available if y'all give us a deal that we really like. We are not trying to just give him away for peanuts. This isn't a PJ Tucker situation, even. I think that was what was referenced in there in terms of Eric Gordon. But I would think the same thing applies to Christian Wood, right? Like, hey, we're not just trying to get this guy out of here because he's sulking or whatever you want to describe it as, what PJ Tucker did. I think they want to send that message very strongly that, look, kind of even similar to the Ben Simmons situation on a smaller scale. Like, we are not trying to just give this guy away. If y'all want him, give us a good offer. I think another thing that was really critical in that report was that the team that they cited as having interest in Christian Wood was the Miami Heat. What is the Miami Heat known for? Culture. Guys come in, they play hard, they play as a team, and you really don't hear a lot of, issues in the Miami locker room, right? Other than I think one of the Morris twins had the problem with Jokic, but that's kind of more on the court thing. So I think leaking that the Heat had interest, that was a big giveaway that, hey, we want to send a strong message. Teams that have strong locker rooms are still interested in this guy. And again, we're not just going to give him away. So that's what I feel like that report was. We had another report last year from the Rockets where Adrian Wojnarowski and Brian Windhorst were in a space, and one of the questions was brought up, and Brian Windhorst said, hey, if the Rockets could get a first for Victor Oladipo, they would have got him out of here by now. And the next day, Woj ended up having to give a report where they basically walked that back, and they said, oh, the Rockets have a bunch of good trade packages for Victor Oladipo. They are going to get a good deal out of this. And they ended up sending him to the Miami Heat. The return, we ended up getting Kelly Olynyk. So I think it was better than we thought at the time. But you could see that the Rockets organization was really in a damage control mode at that point. And I think that's what we're getting here again. It's, hey, we're posturing very hard. And I do think there is truth to that, right? They're not just going to give Christian Wood away. They're not just going to say, hey, Charlotte, give us Mason Plumlee and a second, right? And then we'll be happy to get Christian Wood off our hand. That's not what's going to happen. They are going to want a good package. And, I think this is the next step in doing so. I'm sure with people like Christian Wood and Eric Gordon, these aren't PJ Tucker, right? These guys are having good years, even though Christian Wood had a little bit of a sketchy year defensively. Offensively, he still looked really good. These are premium assets. This is going to go straight all the way up to the deadline, maybe, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours before, because they are going to canvass all the offers, make sure they take the best one. And, in Eric Gordon's situation, I would say they're probably going to do right by him a little bit more than Christian Wood. But
we have one more player, probably the most important player to talk about. I know that you have Launchpad coming up, so we'll try to finish this up as quick as possible. But just some quick talking about Jalen Green and his performances halfway through the season. And with that, we'll answer some of these questions really quickly, and then we'll wrap it up.
So you said Jalen Green, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So going back to last year's offseason, I did a lot of scouting on Jalen Green. Me and Prodigy were in on Jalen Green probably at January this time last year. We were already doing a lot of scouting on him. I was one of the leaders of the Green Gang. I was very high on him. There was the back and forth on who's going to do better coming out. I was very adamant that maybe for a scoring guard a little bit less so, but generally guards, it's going to take a little bit more for them to impact a game. They have to know how to make the right reads. They have to know where they need to be in the offense. They're doing passing. It's going to take time to build chemistry with guys. And I think the other thing you have to consider on Jalen Green is they sat John Wall for the year. DJ Augustine started the year off very slowly, and then they had the double big lineup. So he didn't come in and immediately play with a guy like LaMelo Ball or a guy like who else do we want to throw there? Ja Morant, right? Guys where this guy is going to draw tons of offensive attention and you're going to get these super easy shots. And Jalen Green has got some easy shots that he hasn't knocked down, right? He definitely needs to shoot better. He needs to be more in control as a driver. Not getting a lot of foul calls has hurt him. He is a guy that really does predicate a lot of his game as a driver. And, being it, not even that not getting calls in and of itself is an issue for him. It's that he goes in there and is really getting hammered to a point where he's not able to finish through that level of contact. Getting stronger is going to help. Adding some more finesse to the way he drives and the way he attacks the rim is going to help. But he's not able to go in there and just overpower people at this point. And he's not getting the foul calls to allow him to skate on doing stuff like that. His passing has been something that really you saw a tiny little bit of him passing last year in the G League, but he didn't run pick and roll even to the level he is now. He's had a lot of good touch passes recently, a lot of good quick swing passes recently. I think that's the one area where he's really exceeded expectations. Defensively, early on in the year, I thought he was trying to overhelp in a way that showed that he was really confident in his closing speed in a way that he shouldn't have been. He's a fast guy, don't get me wrong, but half of closing out isn't just how fast you are. It's how quickly your brain processes that that ball has been passed. And now I have to use my speed to get to the defender. And I think he has been better in that sense. There was a stat a couple weeks ago where they showed that, he was one of the better guys in the league as an isolation defender. The Rockets really aren't using him overall as a stopper guy. So I think take that with a little grain of salt. He's on guys that aren't the primary offensive option, but he still has been able to not get cooked by those guys. Right? I think that is something to be said because he's a guy that's very small and he is athletic, but he's not as strong as he needs to be. Building strength is going to help him in that sense too. The thing that I'm watching as the season goes on, when he played against Gobert, he went to a floater at a certain point as a counter, and we've seen him hit some mid-range shots a little bit more consistently lately. He's gone to those. Early on in the season, he hit a few, but it seemed like he just wasn't able to really get the touch, really wasn't able to get the distance down on what his mid-range shot needs to look like. If he's going to be a guy that's not going to get to the rim and get a lot of fouls or get to the rim and be able to overpower people when he's at the rim, you need to have a counter. And I want to see how his floater develops. I want to see how his mid-range pull-up game develops. So that way, when he is playing someone like Gobert or Embiid, those were two guys that he really struggled against because those are two of the best rim protectors in the league. And you're not going to be able to just overpower your way to the rim against those guys. How is he going to counter? How is he going to think the game and process the game offensively to say, hey, look, maybe I go all the way in. This guy's rim protector is going to come to me because they know I'm very aggressive as a driver. And now I'm throwing that dump off pass to Christian Wood, who that defender had to come up and help and come off of. I think that's the next step for him is thinking the game 2 and 3 steps ahead, getting his offensive processing to a point where he's manipulating the defense rather than just trying to drive in and make something happen with his athleticism. So, overall, I still thought he would score better this year. I think his 3-point shot being inconsistent has hurt him a lot, whether that's what they've tried to do with him in terms of updating his shooting mechanics. That may have an effect. We've seen games where he has gotten hot. He runs kind of hot and cold in that way. If he gets off to a hot start, kind of like Kevin Porter Jr., then he is able to kind of keep things going down the rest of the game. But we've also seen games where he has been effective as a driver, and then that gets him going as a shooter. So if he can't get either of those two things going, and he's not able to get the calls to get to the line, it's hard to get cheap points or easy points to really get yourself going mentally. And so how is he going to handle that as he goes through the rest of the season, right? If he has a game where he starts off bad, can he get himself involved in the offense as the game goes on? Can he get himself involved in the offense? We've seen him get involved as a passer, as a rebounder. If he's not going to be the first, second, or third option, that may be how he has to impact games going forward. So can he pick his spots? Can he find ways to impact the game if he's not just scoring? I think up till now, impacting the game when he's not just scoring has been better than people thought, and the scoring has been a lot less than people thought. So, getting that scoring up while still finding those ways to impact the game is what's going to be pivotal for him. Depending on if we move Eric Gordon at the trade deadline, and if we heard reports that they may be looking to move David Nwaba and even DJ Augustine as well. Does he get more on-ball reps? I can't remember who it was. Someone tweeted out that he's a guy that seems to be more effective offensively when he has the ball in his hands a lot and he can really get a rhythm. He's not had the ball in his hands consistently at all this entire season. So maybe you move those guys. He's able to have the ball in his hands a little bit more, able to get in a rhythm. I think those are the key things for Jalen Green the rest of the season. And again, I'm not giving up on Jalen Green. Again, I was really high on him. I think the athleticism that he has is something that once he builds the strength to go with that, starts to get even just the tiniest level of respect from the refs. That's going to be a big thing for him because, you've seen, Russell Westbrook is a guy that he is also very athletic, but doesn't get a crazy amount of calls. He gets more calls than Jalen Green. So if you can at least get Jalen Green up to the point where he's getting a Russell Westbrook level of whistle, he's going to be a lot more effective that way. But yeah, I think overall for Jalen this season, we'll see how the second half goes. You want to see him start putting together a string of games where he looks more, not necessarily just involved, but looks more confident, looks more like he's playing under control. and like we said, finding a way to impact games if it's not just as a scorer.
I'll get to one question here because I know that you're the scouting guy. So I haven't done a lot of research yet as far as the prospects for the upcoming draft go, but we got a question here from Jalen Johnson 0339 saying, my question would be, what player in this upcoming draft would you like to see the Rockets go for? There's a lot of really intriguing prospects at the top of the draft. Chet Holmgren, Paulo Banchero, Jabari Smith. So we'll see what prospect or prospects are you looking for at the top of the draft? Which ones pique your interest the most?
So I think it's interesting that this guy, his username is Jalen Johnson, because that's a guy who I was very interested in last year. Just from a structural standpoint, and I said this game thing going into last year, I was like, give me a big wing. We've been a team that's played small for so long. Give me a guy that is good at rebounding, has some length, and can guard maybe not Giannis and LeBron, but like Chris Middleton, right? Someone that can guard that type of archetype. And they got Usman Garuba in, and he's someone that we saw him guard Kevin Durant in the Olympics, and that really fit the archetype. But for me, I think Jabari Smith is a guy. He's come on really strong recently. He wasn't really in that top group going into the season. Just from an archetype standpoint, right? Really good shooter. That's going to help if you have Tate and Şengün out on the court. Looks like he's a really good on-ball defender. That's checking another box for me. He has NBA bloodlines. That may not be important to some people, but I think just knowing how to play the game, knowing how to prepare for the game, I think that's something that can be really impactful. So I do like that as well from him, that he has kind of an NBA lineage. And we saw that with Josh Christopher, right? Another guy that we talked about before. His brother played, I think semi-professionally, but he played alongside a lot of other guys that came out of California in that James Harden to Trevor Ariza kind of era. So that does help you. That helps you know how to prepare. You have a resource to lean on. So I like that with Jabari Smith as well. His handle is a little concerning, but we've seen other guys. I tweeted this out a couple weeks ago, or actually I think a week or so ago. What guys have we seen really make a big handle improvement as a big wing when they get in the league? And I got probably 7 or 8 responses of guys that, improve their handle from a point that was maybe even less than Jabari Smith's to a point that's, elite to proficient, right? And some names we heard, Paul George, Chris Middleton, Kawhi Leonard, those type of names. And if you're someone that's that type of size, a big wing, you can handle the ball and shoot. There's a term called planet theory, right? And it's usually used in football in terms of like Derrick Henry is a planet theory guy. There's only so many guys that like Derrick Henry that are walking around on the face of the planet. And it's the same thing with a big wing that can shoot and have touch and finesse. There's only so many of those guys walking around on the face of the earth. And so I think Jabari Smith is a guy that fits that mold. I would really be happy to see the Rockets go after him. After that, I haven't done too much, quote unquote, down ballot scouting yet. I do like Adrian Griffin. I think just structurally, that's another guy that would fit really well with this team. If they could trade up to get a guy like that, I think that would be another guy. And the other guy that I haven't done a lot of scouting just on my own of this guy. I've been presented with a lot of information. One of my friends, Nima, some of y'all may have known him. He works for the G League now. He's been a very big advocate of Marion Beauchamp, so I'm going to throw his name in the mix as well. I've watched a lot of his stuff, and he looks very good. He's coming on fast. I think that will be a name that a lot of people see rising up the boards very quickly. So those are the 2 guys that I'm really targeting now. We could potentially get Beauchamp with the Heat pick. We could package some picks, maybe the picks we get from Eric Gordon, trade Christian Wood trade, move up and get a guy like that. I think this is a good year to consolidate picks because I don't think there's a lot of hype in this year, but there are a lot of guys that fit things that the Rockets need to have on the team, given the pieces that they already have. So it wouldn't surprise me if they are aggressive in a move-up situation, kind of like what they did with Şengün last year. The Rockets have brought in a lot of draft-specific guys. So it wouldn't surprise me if there's another guy like Şengün that the Rockets are higher on than a lot of other teams, and they are aggressive in consolidating picks, maybe even bringing in a pick from a later year to move up in this draft, maybe get 2 kind of like top 15 guys. Those are some names that I'm interested in immediately. And I do like Banchero. I think just with the way a Şengün Banchero front court looks, it's a little bit more problematic than Jabari Smith. Chet Holmgren, I think that front court would look very good defensively. What he's able to do as an offensive player kind of remains to be seen. We saw a lot more of him as a handler and pull-up shooter when he was in the younger, AAU, high school, those type of things, even the Team USA games, we saw a lot more of that from him. We haven't seen a lot this year, but I would encourage people to go back and look at some of that footage as well, because he did do a lot with the ball. Some people were saying Kevin Durant. Personally, me as a scout, I don't like to compare anyone to an all-time great. I think that's an unfair comparison. I like to use maybe say like Zach LaVine, right? When we compared Jalen Green to Zach LaVine is a great player, but he's not. You're not comparing him to Kobe, right? I think that's an unfair comparison. It sets guys up for disappointment, because when you compare someone to Kobe or Michael Jordan, that just it's a very loaded comparison that's drawing on a lot of other things. So comparing Chet to Kevin Durant, I think is a little unfair, but he is someone that has one of the better handles that I have seen at that height. So that's something that Chet has going for him as well. Getting into Jaden Ivey is like a mix of, some people call him John Morant, and then kind of, and some other people will give him like, I'm trying to think what the body type is like. He's a very strong build, right? Maybe a Jalen Suggs type of build. But some people want to go right ahead and draft Jaden Ivey. We will land at 4, and even if we have Josh Christopher, Jalen Green, Kevin Porter Jr., right? We've seen teams that have drafted best player available and it works out for them, right? We're seeing that with the Sacramento Kings. It hasn't worked out for them just in terms of their team being well, but now they have assets where they're maybe able to move one of those guys for a player that is going more impact player. So not every player that you draft is going to be part of your long-term core. I think people need to become more comfortable with that. Drafting best player available, especially at the point in the rebuild the Rockets are now, is something that is very important. And if they are going with Eddie, I wouldn't be totally opposed to it, but I think there are a lot of guys up there right now. Those are just a few guys. You're going to hear those names a lot. So start looking into those guys and get to, once we go to the March, there's going to be a lot more stratification on a lot of these guys, more tape and viewing it on them. Duke is a team that if y'all are watching a team, watch them, and then watch Auburn as well. I think just because of the leagues that those guys are in, you're going to see a lot of players that they're playing against. ACC and SEC are very good leagues now. So you'll see other guys just by watching those two teams that may pop up in draft, film and mock drafts to the Rockets later on.
My fault. Again, for me, I was mainly going into the season high on Jalen Duren out of Memphis, mainly because of his ability to be a defensive disruptor. I know we missed out on Mobley last year. We didn't take him. Duren kind of salvages it in a way. He's not quite the defensive disruptor that Mobley is, but he is still a good defensive presence. And I would also like to see how Kevin Porter Jr. does with the vertical threat that Duren is. That's an intriguing, but it seems like he's dropping in draft boards now. So it seems like it might be a reach if we go for him.
Duren and Imani Bates are ironically enough having the same issue of they got measured and the measurements didn't hit the way a lot of people thought they would. And now people are kind of hesitant on them. Imani Bates is not in this draft class. He was able to reclassify and go into college, but he's not available until the next draft. But those two guys, for that reason, people are concerned about their measurables. So it's just a natural part of drafting, unfortunately, for them.
But yeah, also Jabari Smith is a guy who I've slowly started to get more high on just because of his profile. First of all, his fit. He's like, he fits so perfectly with what we're trying to do. And he's also just got loads and loads of talent. I think he would be a really good fit for us as well. Those are probably my top two guys. I would love to get Duren if he goes back up draft boards, has a strong end to his college season. But if not, I think Jabari Smith is a guy who I would definitely love to have. Nothing wrong with Chet Holmgren either. That's probably my third option. But yeah, again, I think people are underrating how good this draft class is. It's not quite the hype that last year's draft class was. Last year was like just loaded with talent. Not quite as much this year, but I think there is still going to be a lot of potential for the Rockets to really come out with a lot of really, really good pieces here. And with that, we will just about wrap it up. Before we conclude, is there anything else that you'd like to say?
Man, I guess going back to the scouting stuff, it's going to be another big year for the Rockets in the draft, right? Like we said, they're going to probably get some additional pieces from Eric Gordon and Christian Wood, those trades, and maybe even a Daniel Tice trade, kind of like we talked about earlier. But I wouldn't, like you said, I wouldn't go into this draft thinking this doesn't have the hype of last year. We're not going to get a guy that can really impact our future in this draft. I think there's guys that can impact your future in every draft. Like we said earlier, the Rockets have invested a lot into scouting. You want to have confidence in Rafael Stone, the guys he's brought in. Because, I mean, I know I said earlier that we don't really know what his draft history is, but the limited history that we do have has shown that he's a guy that can find pieces late in the draft. KJ Martin, Şengün, Josh Christopher. We'll see on Garuba again. I was super high on Garuba coming out of the draft, so I'm not giving up on him now. But they have been through 2 drafts able to demonstrate that they are very competent as drafters, as scouters, as evaluators. So I think there's no reason to go into the draft as Rockets fans and say, hey, I hope our guys don't blow this again, right? Like, I think they've done a great job, maybe not to a level of like Memphis. Memphis, I think, is the standard absolutely of drafting, just out drafting and talent development. But I think just as Rockets fans, be positive for us about they brought in. I know a lot of people there were a little bit suspicious for in there, and that's really his guy. You can kind of take credit for what Stone does. Tilly has taken a bit more of a back seat. Let the basketball guys operate and do what they need to do. Give the money that is necessary to bring in a lot of additional guys. So just from that the Rockets aren't going to finish the season as a top team in the West or a top team in the league. But I think they've positioned themselves very well in terms of an organizational structure to do the right things at the trade deadline, at the draft, the combine, and get some. Right now, they're going to. So that's the statement I'll give to conclude with. But I feel like we're in a good place just in terms of, like I said, our evaluation, our scouting, and our drafting guys.
And yeah, again, thanks. Thank you very much for joining. As far as Don, he does a lot of great work. So be sure to follow. I just posted the handles on the screen right now, but Apollo Launchpad, and also make sure to follow Don at Don Knock on Twitter. He does really, really good work. And again, just
we got to get you on the space sometime. Get you on the space sometime.
For sure. We'll for sure check in and join at some point. It might not be me, might be some of the other guys, because I'm usually busy during the games, or I just go to sleep before the end of the games.
Yeah.
But for sure, we'll get at least one of the guys will join. We'll make sure to get them joining in. A really nice Rockets media community that we've got here. A bunch of really good organizations doing great work. So check out Apollo Launchpad and Don Knock on Twitter. And as always, thank you for checking in, joining me today for this a little bit over an hour long stream. I really appreciate you having me on here.
Thanks for having me on. And yeah, I was getting a call from Brad right now. Thanks to everyone that watched and tuned in. Appreciate all y'all being, engaged, active Rockets fans. That's what makes the Rockets Twitter community so awesome. So thanks to you guys. And I always sign off, be safe and go Rockets. So I'll give that to y'all as well.
All right. Thanks, guys. And for our viewers, thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one. Peace.